When choosing who you're going to mate with, it is really best to avoid mating with close relatives, if at all possible, or maybe even if it's not possible, don't do it. The reason for that is that it decreases one's fitness. There is an increased chance of genetic abnormalities brought about by recessive genes. And so, how do animals actually work this out? How do they know who to not breed with? And that's what we're going to consider in this segment on inbreeding and incest avoidance. This is a crater in the lower center portion of the screen in Africa called the Ngorongoro crater. It's huge, and there's a population of lions that have been living within this crater, and they essentially can't get out. They cannot climb the crater walls. So there's a lion with a lion cub right there from the Ngorongoro crater, and just another map of the crater. There was an incident there some time ago that led to an enormous amount of inbreeding, and that's described in this video.
This year, the flies are just an irritation, but in 1962, unusually long and heavy rains created a lethal plague of blood-sucking flies. Lions died, unable to hunt and covered in sores. The entire crater population crashed, and only 7 females and 1 male survived. Today, most of the lions in the crater are descended from those 7.
That's incredible. 7 females and 1 male. So in the males, in all the lions that are around today inside the crater, there's all kinds of abnormalities that are showing up due to genetic defects, such as abnormal sperm, for example. And you can see the sperm in the center and the one on the right are abnormal relative to the one on the left, which is normal. So incest is not a good thing. It behooves animals to not do that. They had no choice. They were stuck inside this crater. Okay, these are zebra finches, and they are native to Australia. And here we have a male over on the left courting a female over on the right with his courtship song. Zebra finches are interesting because the males learn their song from their father, whoever raised them. And it's not a perfect match, but they'll incorporate some syllables from the father's song into what will become their courtship song. They might rearrange certain things and make some other improvisations, but there's an incredible amount of similarity there. Now, remember, females are going to end up choosing who to mate with. This is a Bengalese finch, and the Bengalese finch never comes in contact with the zebra finch except in a laboratory. Bengalese finches were domesticated in Asia, and zebra finches, like I said before, are from Australia. And there are domestic forms of those as well. And you find both of these varieties of finches in pet stores throughout the world. So there is a Bengalese finch song. I don't have the recording, but you can just see from the sonogram what it looks like. This is the song of a zebra finch that was reared by a Bengalese finch in the lab. So the eggs were cross-fostered, and this zebra finch knew as its father only a Bengalese finch. And you can see the incredible similarity in some of these syllables, especially here in the middle. Compare that with a zebra finch that was reared by a zebra finch, and there's no similarity between that and the Bengalese finch song. So, now that poses a potential problem for the female, not in terms of Bengalese finches, but in terms of zebra finches that are picking up their courtship song or elements from their courtship song from their father. So, for example, there's a female being courted by a male. Might you be my brother? Because my brother would have learned his song from our father. And mating with your brother is no more good in zebra finches as it would be in humans. Are you my father? Same deal. Could be her father that's courting her. Birds don't care. And so, but she's the one who's going to be making the choice. She has to be sure to not mate with a close relative, especially when there's so many non-relatives in the vicinity that are also courting her. So I did an experiment at the University of Bielefeld in the 1970s where we looked at that. And the University of Bielefeld is like the zebra finch capital of the world in terms of laboratories outside of Australia. This is a room I used, and each of those is a different cage, and there's little nest boxes for the offspring hanging out of each of those cages. So there's a mated pair per cage plus their offspring. This is the test apparatus that I constructed, and it's inside an anechoic chamber just to control for echoes and things like that. And I used a remote camera, so I was not in the chamber when the birds were actually being tested in these 30-minute long tests. So notice that we have a loudspeaker over at this side and a loudspeaker over at this side and a very long cage. These are the stimuli that we used in these choice tests, the simultaneous choice tests with two sounds playing at the same time, but from either loudspeaker. So we have songs that I recorded from fathers and songs that I recorded from their sons. So this is the son of that father, this is the son of that father, this from this, and this from this. Let me just play you two samples here. The one on top. And his son. So there are differences, but there are some striking similarities there as well. And let's go down to the third one, father and son. I mean, the end syllables there are pretty much identical. So, yeah, the sons are learning the songs of their fathers. So we have these two loudspeakers. We have a neutral zone. There's a little start box that I put the female in before we began the test. And basically what she had to do was spend twice as much time in one approach zone next to one loudspeaker as in the other in order for it to be counted as a choice in a 30-minute time period. Okay. We gave the females two tests. Some were dissimilar songs. A father's song from one loudspeaker versus an unrelated zebra finch from another loudspeaker. So those songs would obviously be kind of different from one another. The unrelated male would not be a close relative, for example. A more difficult test was the father's son versus the son's song, because remember that the son is picking up song elements from the father, so those songs are going to be kind of similar to one another. So that's a harder discrimination test by the female. Now this is important to understand. These are approach tests of auditory recognition. These are not sexual tests of any kind. There is no incest avoidance or song avoidance or anything. The only question we're asking here is, can you show us that you recognize a song of your father or a song of your father versus a son after 90 days of not hearing that song, because they were separated, the females were separated for 90 days or thereabouts and isolated from all males. Is your memory for father that good? Can you tell us that it is or not? That's what we're doing here. So, again, start her out in that center area. Is she going to go there? Is she going to go there? Is she going to spend more than twice as much time on one side versus the other? In which case, she's showing a preference. Okay, so here are the results of the two tests. Father versus stranger. And in one situation, again, the stranger's song is very dissimilar from the father, a relatively easy discrimination test. And in the other situation, it's the stranger's song happens to be the son of the father, meaning the father's son and the stranger's song will be similar to one another. Can the female have that fine degree of auditory discrimination? So, dissimilar, strong preference for the father's song. Some went to the stranger, some went to neither. They just stayed in that middle area or didn't spend twice as much time at one end of the apparatus as the other. Neither of them chose both. Okay. What about the harder test of the father versus son, where the stranger song happens to be the father's son? Again, they're able to recognize their father. Now, they haven't heard father's song for quite some time, so they have this remarkable degree of long-term memory. So they can use this potentially as a means of avoiding who to mate with. Don't mate with a close relative if the song is familiar to you, if you recognize that song from early in life. Now, again, this was not a mating test. It was an auditory preference test. Fortunately, some other researchers came along several years later and actually did something kind of like this, but they were actually testing mating preferences, unlike what I'm doing here. And sure enough, the zebrafinch females were in fact able to use the song to avoid mating with a close relative. Okay, incest compensation, so to speak. In other words, what if you're in a situation where it might be somewhat difficult to avoid incest? One way around that is to play the field. Mate with other individuals other than your close relatives to at least increase the genetic differences within you that you'll pass along to your offspring to avoid the problems that we typically see of mating only with close relatives, like with those lions. Well, this is the case with three species of shorebirds: the western sandpiper, common sandpiper, and the Kentish plover. And the problem is these birds don't disperse. They stay around the area where they nested. And then when they grow up, they're going to be nesting and choosing mates in the same area. So there's going to be an awful lot of close relatives nearby. I mean, it's almost like the Ngorongoro crater, except they don't have to stay there. It's just their life history that they do. So there could be a possibility for a lot of inbreeding going on there. So what happens, and of course inbreeding decreases fitness, as I've already mentioned several times. Turns out that the higher the genetic similarity between a mated pair, the more the female will be copulating with other males that are not close relatives, the more extra pair matings there are. So even though they might be distant relatives, the more distant you are, the less problems there are in terms of the decreased fitness. So more extra pair matings with increased genetic similarity. How do the females know about their genetic similarity to their mate? We have no idea. No one's been able to assess that in these species. We just know that it happens. So, incest, inbreeding, not good things, and ways to avoid them.